Okay, hello, hello. We are at week 8. I hope everybody is doing amazing. Okay, so let me see if I can work this. This has been an exciting week. We are into Numbers, chapters 2 through 22, and Psalm 90. Okay, Okay, as usual, if you'd like to download the schedule that we use for every week, you can do that at
Reminder, remove the video.
you can go to BibleRoom.org and download the schedule. Okay, let me stop this music and we can get started. All right. So last week, as we discovered, I needed to do a whole revamp of the how I was logging the references. And so made a good bit of progress on that this week. And we are going to um, set up the screen share and we can start. Okay. So I need to put this over here. Mm. Oh my goodness gracious. This is for the presenter. Oh my goodness, goodness, goodness. And right here. Okay. Sorry about that. Now, we will. Hmm, okay, we have to start all over here and get back to the beginning of it. So, man, made a lot of good discoveries this week, and even for this week, we included the playlist inside of the description of the YouTube. So from right there in the description, you can actually click on the audio. If you want to use the King James version, you can click on the audio from there. So that makes it a little bit easier instead of having to download the schedule even. Okay. All right. So over to let's transition over to the All right, so this is what the recordings look like that I put inside of the description. And of course, we are here in Exodus, between Exodus and when King David arrives and the nation of Israel has left Egypt and they are now in Sinai in the wilderness. Okay, one thing I discovered this week was, of course, we are here at Judah. Perez hasn't been born yet. We're here, right here, at Judah, as far as the genealogy from Adam to Christ. And this week, I connected the Philistines, Canaanites, quote unquote Arabs, and Nimrod and Cush and all of those sons to Ham, which therefore connected him to Abraham. And that means that on this chart that we were using, those families, Ham, these are the Hamites right here. These are the Hamites. Let me go back. So Abraham's wife Keturah, that is that line right there. That was interesting to connect. Okay, so these are the topics that happened this week from arrangement of the camp. We're going to talk about the standard and my experience when I first encountered that word in Numbers 2. It sent me off in a big old study. And we're going to talk about the cloud of fire in Numbers 9. And of course, you heard all of this if you listened through the soundtrack for this week. And the next set of topics are here from Numbers 13 to Numbers 22. And we're going to touch on, in Numbers 15, the tassels on garments. And we're going to touch on the water from the rock at Meribah. And we're going to talk about the cousins in Numbers 21 of Israel's journey to Moab, and then Psalm 90. Okay, so we're in the wilderness. They've left Egypt. They are camped at Mount Sinai. We know they did that for about a year while they were building the temple. So in Numbers 2, when I ran into this word standard, okay, what it talked about in Numbers 2 was the families were going to camp around the tabernacle in a certain way and in um, certain directions. Like um, they were all around it. Like Moses and Aaron, they had their tent up front, and then the Levites were around, and all of the Levites had different duties as far as the tabernacle was concerned, and then everybody else had their stations around there. So in Numbers 2, when it was talking about that each camp, each tribe would gather under their standard, under their own standard, their family. Let me see if I can let's see, can I pull that up? Let's see. Let's see. So I'd love to pull that up for you, but it is in Numbers 2, talking about their standard. I took that to mean standard as in values, and that's not exactly what it meant. It just meant a family banner, but I took it as values. So I started looking for ways to be able to use the Bible as my standard of living, more of a standard, like going to find answers for things directly from the word, instead of relying on, a minister or somebody else. I wanted to see where those things were for myself. So that was my encounter with standard. Well, when we look at the tent of meeting in Exodus, when it talks about the tent of meeting in Exodus 19, it says that God descended the mountain of Sinai. When God descended, that is when all of Israel was at the bottom of the mountain, and they had quartered off some of the mountain, and God came down, and Moses went up, and he stayed up there so long that in Exodus 32 they had created the golden calf, and they separated themselves from God. The Levites came forth and killed a bunch of people, and that was like their separation for being separated unto God. But in Numbers 33, the word tabernacle is hell. Oh hell. Okay. But that particular tabernacle was the one that Moses set up outside of the camp. Moses set up a tent outside of the camp because at this point the people were separated from God. And it talks about how he would go to the tent in the cloud, and God would appear and come down and meet him there. And people would stand at their tents, in the doors of their tents, watching as Moses went into the tent, and how the cloud would be at the door of the tent while Moses was inside, talking face to face to God like a friend. And people would bow at their tents because they knew that this was Moses directly communicating with the God of heaven. So that is that word ohel, that different word there in 33. Well, by the time you get to Exodus 40, you have a different word, which is mishkan, and it still means tabernacle. Well, ohel actually means tent, but in some translations, you'll see the same word used there for ohel as you do with mishkan, but other ones, oh, mishkan needs a H in there, Mishkan, I believe. Um, so in some translations, ohel is translated as tabernacle. And then in other translations, it calls it a tent of meeting. And then when it gets to Exodus 40, it calls it tabernacle. So the point here was the ohel tent of meeting was the one that Moses set up himself, and God met him there. So that means that we can set up our own scheduled and dedicated time for God, and God can meet us there. That was very powerful to me. So this is the Mishkan. Okay, got that spell right there this time. This is the Mishkan and tabernacle, and how the different parts of the tabernacle. It was completed on the first day of the first month of the second year. So it took them almost a year to get the tabernacle itself finished. So one of the things we have to keep in mind is the when Moses was up on the mountain, was up on Sinai getting the tablets. We all saw the movie The Ten Commandments. He was getting those tablets of the commandments, but he was also getting the blueprint and the instructions and the the details for the tabernacle, right down to the measurement of everything. What wood to use, what should be overlaid with gold, what how things should be covered and created, down to how the curtains would be joined together. So he was getting all those details. And when you think about all those details that are listed there in Exodus, you can see why it might have taken him 40 days, and 40 nights up there on the mountain writing all that stuff down. What if he didn't bring enough paper? He had to create something to write on. I don't know. But up there, he received all of those instructions for the tabernacle. So that is all of the instructions for the tabernacle that built this structure. He got up on Mount Sinai. But when he came down and the people had actually defiled themselves by creating that golden calf, they were separated from God. So he set up a tent outside of the camp, his own personal space to meet with God. And that is the opportunity that we have, because we can set up our tent. No matter what is going on in our lives, we can create a space for God to be with us. that we have communication and contact with Him, that is our own special meeting place for God. And what that looks like today, in with all the distractions we have and all of the entertainment we have and all the things we have to do, we have to block out that time. You know how the tabernacle was covered with many different layers of skins. We saw the picture. There was a different layers of things that covered the outside of the camp, outside of the tabernacle. That's how we have to do it. We have to make our time that we dedicate to God insulated from all of the other stuff that we have to do, all of the other things that are going on, because that is our time to be face to face with the Father. And that is a beautiful thought. It is wonderful to think about that. And so that is what I wanted to make sure we talked about there. Now, this was another interesting thing that I saw, the Urim and Thummim. Now, the priest had this special outfit that he had to wear, and on the breastplate was 12 gems that represented the 12 tribes. Well, behind the breastplate was this Urim and Thummim. It was a very small object, because we know from these verses right here that it was kept behind the breastplate. So it couldn't have been that big. And then in these verses, it talks about how this Urim and Thummim was used to determine the will of God. And of course, we know that the priests that would wear these garments, this outfit here, they were descendants of Aaron, and the word Kohen is Hebrew for priest. And you can hear it talked about today, that the Kohanim is the word for Jewish priests. The cloud and the fire. The cloud and the fire. Imagine. So this is a picture that I imagine. Imagine being in the desert, and at night there is this cloud that looks like fire leading you through the desert when you're on the move, or just hovering over the tabernacle when you are stationary, never alone out there. And the same message that I would that is the same message that I would dare to take when part of the screen is missing there. Um that is part of the message that I would take from setting up our personal tents, our personal communion with God, that things that would harm us, we could be protected by making sure that we stay in contact with God. Okay. Okay. The fringe and the tassels. Now, in Numbers 15, it had this verse: a fringe that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and that ye seek not after your own heart and with your own eyes, after which you used to go a whoring. So that was Israel going after different gods. Well, I thought it was interesting that God thought it was a good idea for them to have stuff hanging off the hems of their garments to remind them of their commitments to God, of the commandments. And so what kind of method do we use today to remind us of the things that we're supposed to do? Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is simply like our calendars, right? Like I do everything almost from my calendar. If it's not on my calendar, it's probably not going to get done. So that the tassels for them as a reminder, but today we use our calendar as a reminder, and things are all digital and things can beep and go off and remind us when we have to do things. But the tassels for them was their reminder. What if that is, we set up those reminders and to be able to actually go into our tent, that this is the time I've set aside to meet with the Lord. If we had a doctor's appointment, if we had, to go and, sign some papers because we won the lottery or whatever, we would absolutely be there. And God is such a, he won't make us, he doesn't make us. And so us creating an actual Bible habit, creating a habit of time in our tent with the Lord is something we can do. And so, I had to think about, yeah, it is my calendar that I use to make sure that I am doing what I've committed to do. Okay, so another thing that stood out was in Numbers 20, when the Israelites got all the way to the edge of the promised land at Kadesh Barnea. They got there, they sent in the spies to check it out, see what was there. Caleb and Joshua, they came back, they thought they could take them. The others said that they couldn't. So look at this. They're here at Kadesh Barnea. They decide we can't take them on. So they turn around and they go back towards Edom. Well, they asked the king of Edom, hey, can we pass through your land? Can we just cut through here and get over here to the wilderness instead of having to do all of this travel? Well, the king of Edom said, nope, you cannot, and even came out with armies to say, no, you cannot. So they had to travel all the way back around here. But the king of Edom was, that was their family. They were relatives. They were not only the relatives of brothers, they were the relatives of twin brothers, Jacob and Esau. Remember, Esau sold his birthright to Jacob. And okay, and the relatives here are the ones that just wouldn't let them go around. Now, you can imagine that the people that were in the camp of Israel, it was a lot of people. You remember in the soundtrack this week when they were numbered, it was how many people? It was 603,000. Let me share this. It was 603,500 people. 500 people. And that was just the 20-year-olds that were able to go to war. So some scholars estimate it was like 2 million people that was wandering in the desert. So, maybe he just wasn't comfortable with that many people coming through his land. Maybe it was more than, his people or something. And in any way, he was threatened. So then in Numbers 20, God told Moses to speak to the rock, because after they couldn't go through Moab, they actually, after they couldn't go through Edom, they actually had to go the long way around. Here, they had to go the long way around, so they were out of water and they were complaining. And God said to Moses, take the rod and gather thou the assembly together, thou and Aaron thy brother, and speak ye unto the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth its water. Well, Moses didn't do that. He struck the rock. He hit the rock with the staff instead of speaking to it. And that was the reason he himself didn't get to see the promised land. Okay, so next we had Psalm 90. And Psalm 90 is the prayer of Moses. This psalm is popular at funerals, and it has beautiful requests in the prayer, like teach us to number our days, that we might apply our hearts to wisdom and establish the work of our hands. And that is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing to actually think about in Psalm 90. And that is the prayer of Moses. Okay, so we're still working on making sure that we get all of the things, all of the verses together that need to go within a particular scene, you know. So we're doing the matching of those things. So it was my endeavor here to go through the things that really caught our eye this week. We're still working on I'm calling it like Bible data. We're still working on Bible data, or just the connections, doing the actual references. And I could show you a little bit like what that looks like over here, right here. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're taking each book and we're listing each chapter. And like in Genesis 1:1, where it references John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, we actually put that inside this database. And when we're here, we can actually go over to that, and that is included too. So it makes it a very easy reference. Now, if we go back to here, I'll show you something I discovered this week. So I'm going to go to Genesis 10, and this was a discovery this week. Like, it felt like it was a gem that I uncovered. So the Hamites in Genesis 10, 6 through 20, it talks about the Hamites. Well, that is repeated. That genealogy is repeated in First Chronicles chapter 1, verses 8 through 16. Well, if we go over to there, we can see that these people right here, the Philistines, came from Noah's son, the Hamites. And the Hamites included as well the Canaanites that we know we've heard of, and the Amorites. And those are just two that's like very popular that came out of there. And so from that, I was able to put on this picture here uh, the Canaanites and the Philistines coming from this tribe here, this family here, who were considered like quote unquote pure Arabs, and that was from Abraham and his wife Keturah. And being able to see that, being able to see that and jump around like that, I expect to uncover lots of other gems because it makes it easy to see things. It makes it easy to see things. So that is what I have for today. And I see a comment still catching up. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. And that is what I have today. It is my endeavor to make these things shorter because it's just a review and it's just a sharing what stood out to us, or just the encounter that we had with the Bible the past week, just making room to make that a dedicated practice to actually share those things. So as we close, I pray that the Lord would watch between you and me while we are absent one from another, and may your week May your week be blessed, and I will see you all next week, God willing.